Okay. Thank you, Monica Montgomery Steppe, for joining us this evening. We're kicking off the San Diego Union Tribune Opinion Team's election forums with Monica Montgomery Steppe, a council member who's seeking re-election in District 4. Her opponent, Gloria Evangelista, has declined our invitation to take part in the forum this evening. So as we did in the primary, Monica and I will be doing a one-on-one interview. As I joked in the primary, it might be the toughest forum you've had in a while, but I am looking forward to the conversation. Thanks so much for taking time tonight.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm also looking forward to the conversation.
Great. Yeah, and as questions may come in from the audience, if you have one, drop it in the comment section, and we'll try to get to it. We'll probably talk for about an hour, and there's plenty of ground to cover. As the council member just indicated, there's plenty going on at City Hall. So as we're doing this campaign and thinking through the council office in District 4, I'm reminded of 4 years ago when the then incumbent Myrtle Cole came to our editorial board interview like this, and she brought a piece of paper off of which she read her accomplishments, equivocated on a bunch of issues, and when we asked her about rent control, her chief of staff had to say, "You don't have a position yet." Now, your campaign, your office, your experience is much different. I don't see a piece of paper there in front of you, but why don't you take a second as we're talking here, and share with us what are you most proud of in your first 4 years in office? What are you most happy to have accomplished?
Yeah, well, to be fair, I have a notepad just in case you ask me something and I need to
Full
write it
disclosure,
down.
okay.
It's also, we're in the computer age, so I can look stuff up without you knowing that I'm doing that. So I just want to be fair. I will try not to do that.
I appreciate your honesty and candor. Maybe we should have done that interview 4 years ago online. The election might have gone differently. I can't.
There is a lot to I think be proud of for the community in these last 4 years, and certainly for my office and my staff members who just work so hard. Most of us live in the community or have grown up in District 4. So we really approach the work with our hearts. We know that it's a really tough job, but we also know the potential in our community, and we want to see it. We want to see it grow, and we want to see some of the plans that were left on the table to be picked back up, dusted off, so that the members of District 4 can have the quality of life, that we deserve. I have to go back to the election because I think that the previous election, because I think we were so ready to do the work that we did not celebrate what we had done, right? We really accomplished quite a bit. That was, I believe, the highest amount of voters that District 4 has had since we went to district elections. People were very, very engaged. We walked and talked to so many voters and people who were not necessarily excited about voting, but we were able to hear their perspectives as well. And, we bid out an incumbent that was a council president. And so with that, we went straight to work. That second Tuesday in December after inauguration, we were ready to go. And as a matter of fact, we were keeping up with agendas before then and doing work before then. So I think the community deserves for that to be recognized and put on the table as something that we can all be proud of. And, I'm proud of it. I sacrificed a lot for that. Had no idea how it would turn out, but we took that leap of faith for our community, and we're here. And so, I am proud of many things that we've accomplished. The Black Arts and Culture District, and actually setting that up via resolution so that the city now have that as a priority and begin to invest in those 8 blocks on Imperial Avenue that, have been a devastating part of our community and a part that people are very interested in revitalization. On Monday, I believe that was Yeah, on Monday. Sorry, I was getting my days mixed up. But on Monday, we took a vote on the Commission on Police Practices Implementation Ordinance. When I ran, I said that we would get this done. And what we wanted was an independent commission with independent counsel with subpoena power. We got all of those things, and we have a commission makeup, I believe, that will help with transparency and accountability and building community trust. So that's another, big accomplishment that we started on day one and are seeing it, finally now come to fruition, based on the voters, showing up when Measure B was on the ballot.
Yeah.
So that's a big thing. But also, if we drive around the community, there are for sale homes being built. There's affordable homes being built. There are new businesses popping up. Even in a time of the pandemic, that has been very, very hard on so many people in a lot of different ways. We are still doing our best to deliver on that promise of providing a quality of life for our residents. So there are a lot of things. Those are sort of the tangible things that, I've had the honor of support from my colleagues on. But there's also just the idea that I believe, have changed the conversation at City Hall. We talk about equity quite a bit, but I really see us trying and putting some of those principles into action.
Yeah.
And that's going to take a long time to reap the benefits of that. But we are doing it. And there's not a conversation that we don't have that doesn't include, the idea of equity, and doesn't point out the disparities, the deep disparities that we have in the city of San Diego.
I appreciate that answer, especially the component on equity. And I think you were looking through some of my index cards, because we're going to be talking about some of those subjects you brought up, Imperial and the Police Commission, two of the foremost ones. But let me start by having a conversation with you about climate change. It may not feel like it today when San Diego was overcast and a little chilly. We all had this crazy heat wave not too long ago. And I saw an interview with you where you noted that it hit Council District 4 hard. And you point out that there's a large senior population when we're talking about equity and issues like that. So I guess, there's a lot of talk about the climate action plan and the state's efforts to only starting with banning the sale of gas-powered cars by 2035. That's all off in the distance. Like what if elected, what can happen next year, in 4 years? What can happen immediately to help some of these effects? I mean, climate change is not only real, it's like here now. And we saw that in the heat wave, that the effects are dramatic and stark.
Yeah, absolutely. We did see it, and we did feel it. And we do have many people in our community, but especially our seniors, that it's a very tough time for them to go through these types of heat waves. I was born and raised here in San Diego, and I never experienced, that type of heat, that we've experienced in the last, 5 to 10 years. I just did not experience that growing up. And so it's very, very real. No matter how much people try to deny it, it is a real thing. And what it does require of us is to begin to change some of our behavioral patterns. That with regard to climate change, especially in San Diego, most of our pollution does come from vehicle miles traveled. We know that. And so when we look at looking at our mobility plan at the city of San Diego and doing real work, is, we have been facing litigation around our climate action plan and our goals. How are we going to get to these goals through these incremental steps that we're taking? It's very tough, because it does take more than one person changing their behavior. It does take an entire community doing that. And I will give you an example of how tough it is in District 4, and me having to think about it globally. And then I'll talk about some of the things that we're doing, with regard to not, having no more drive-throughs for our businesses and restaurants. To totally understand it. It's a major initiative. the issue becomes in District 4 that we are behind on getting some of the businesses to our community. And so sometimes they will say, we will come, but we need a drive-through, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have to choose between the lack that we've had in the past and really trying to put forward solutions around climate change. And those are things that maybe not every council member has to think about, but I certainly do. And it's a hard choice because we want our community members to have everything else that everyone has. It's just that we are in this time now where we are moving toward building out our communities differently,
Mm-hmm.
and so being able to communicate that with members of our community is very, very important. I served
Where
on
do
San
you come
Diego.
down on? I'm sorry. Where do you come down on that issue of drive-throughs? Is it situationally specific, or do you have a kind of a one-size-fits-all approach to that?
Well, for me, I would like to look at it case by case.
Yeah.
Our topography in our community is very tough. A lot, it's very hilly. We do have a lot of seniors. We don't have a lot of modern buildings or even modern homes where we don't have a lot of air conditioning in a lot of our homes. So I am looking at the totality of the circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, we're building complete streets so that we are promoting more getting out and walking. And if we have those businesses to complement that complete street model, then I think that, it can work. But I'm not going to overlook folks that, are don't have the ability to walk through our neighborhoods in the same way that others do, that are, senior citizens. I'm not going to overlook that. I just think it needs to be on a case by case basis or a phase out basis.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that, those that get businesses in so that they can then be successful, and we can begin to phase uh, some of these things out. So it's and that's the balance, right? That
Yeah.
we're always having to strike because our communities are so different. So that's kind of where I land on that. But I did serve on San Diego Community Power. I think that's a huge thing to get to our, renewable energy goals by the time that we need to in 2035. So was very excited to serve on that. Very happy that Councilmember LaCava is serving on that board as well now. But being a part of that initial push was important to me. We're also wanting to bring, the green energy industry to the district. We
Mm-hmm.
are the Metropolitan Transit System is looking at housing their green infrastructure charging systems right there in District 4, so that as we go towards having green buses, then that it will be built out in District 4. We're excited about that, and also our energy equity complex. That we are still hopeful and moving on forward, and so that our community can have places to work, play, eat together, all of those things in the same community. Having community like District 4 that we are still in building it back up, right? To incorporate all types of different services, business services, retail, commercial, all of those things is important because folks in my community are driving very far to get to work. And
Yeah.
so if we can build out the City of Villages model that we've had on the books for so long at the City of San Diego, right there in District 4, that will also help with change.
That's actually two of the issues where you and your opponent disagree are the vehicle miles traveled and then the phase out of natural gas in homes for San Diego, which you were one of the proponents of at council. As you were just saying, there are real equity, financial concerns about all of this. Like electric cars, it sounds great. Greenhouse gas emissions account for a huge, come from automobiles. But you can't just snap your fingers and everyone gets an electric car. They're expensive.
Right.
There's no infrastructure. Same with natural gas. I think natural gas is in 8 or 9 out of 10 homes. How do you make that bridge to this is a great idea, but let's get there? Like, how do you get there without leaving people behind who simply can't afford it? Starting with natural gas, since that was one of your votes at council.
Yeah, and the way that I understood it is that moving forward, as we build buildings, we build homes, this will be a requirement, right? One
Okay.
of my first questions that I asked when I was meeting with folks who are advocating um, for this part of the climate action plan um, in the recent amendments that we voted on was, how will this impact economics, right? How will this impact people? And so we kind of ran through some of those numbers, and they're actually in build outs, not that much of a difference. Now, requiring folks who have natural gas now in their homes to have to switch over, no matter what their economic situation is not something that I can blindly support, right? We have had rebates, we've had all kinds of things to help people when we're talking about water conservation and everything else that can help folks get, to where we need them to be collectively. But forcing people who may not have the economic means to change is something that I never have supported blindly. And folks that know that I'm a big advocate for all of the solutions that we have to implement for climate change. I've always had to balance that with the economic hardship of members of my community and across San Diego for that matter.
Yeah. And then you mentioned vehicle miles traveled earlier. You said you support the Sandag mobility plan. That provision, the vehicle mileage tax, was recently taken out after a lot of opposition. Where do you stand on that? Has your position changed? How do you incentivize fewer vehicle miles traveled, if not that way?
So here's how I look at additional fees, additional taxes. Is that I will just go over to the city of San Diego real quick and then kind of come back around to Sandag to provide that context. But at the city of San Diego, we have been forced to make some really hard decisions about water rates increasing, about putting, the people's ordinance and the repeal of that on the ballot. There are stormwater fees because for so long, for decades, we as as city government have kept sweeping these things under the rug. And now in the middle of inflation post pandemic, we're having to make these really, really tough decisions about funding our systems that our people need so much. And you never know how to need something until it doesn't work anymore, right? And so we're juggling this. We're in a really, really tough situation. And if you're looking at it sort of from the outside, um, without the historical context, rightfully so, you put your hands up and say, what the heck going on? Every time I turn around, there's a new fee, or you're discussing, raising taxes on us or whatever it is. But with historical context, we can look and see that this can has been kicked down the road because it is really not easy, especially in a place as expensive as San Diego, generally speaking, because of our housing costs, to tell people that they need to pay more into the government. That is very, very hard to do. And I also think that we should really think about incorporating, when we're doing business with corporations, how they can pay additional fees into the city system as well. So going to Sandag, it's very tough at this time, with gas prices so high. I'm sure you've heard this before. I know how the vote went down, and for these reasons and other reasons, it is hard to begin to get people used to the fact that they may have to pay those additional fees. And so I understand why the vote happened the way that it did. I also know that we don't have many choices the more time goes on. We don't have many choices about us saving our planet, or paying more fees. And it's a very real that is not being dramatic. I think that's where we are at this time. We have to continue to keep these conversations on the table and educate everyone around us. When these conversations coming up at Sandag, one thing that really bothered me were that people that were opposed to the plan in general, that are really opposed to building out a world-class transit system in our region, were on the news quite often early on giving their narrative of what, you know, and their opinion about this plan. And those who were, you know, supportive of the plan were not out there. And so we cannot expect people to come along if we're not willing to talk to them, to answer their questions. We have to do that. This is the time that we're in. We're in a paradigm shift. We are changing, and we can't expect people to come along with us when we don't give them the benefit of really talking to them, even if it's a one-on-one conversations about the changes that we will have to make.
That's interesting. I mean, so much of politics is opportunity and timing. And the reality is gas prices were getting a little better, but they're creeping up again. You know, mortgage rates are literally going through the roof and causing all sorts of problems. And you know, it's a tough time, I think, to ask for anyone to dip into their, you know, pants pocket or wallet and give more to anyone. So you guys got a tough road ahead. But we could talk about climate all night long. We probably should, you know, it might not be unwise to spend an hour on that, but plenty of other issues to get into. I do want to, and you guys have had a busy couple of weeks at council, but recently I want to read this to you, your reaction to, which I think was a pretty important vote, the council passing a new resolution rescinding its 1942 resolution, which called for the FBI to remove Japanese Americans from the city. Let me just restate that for those who don't know history. The City Council in 1942 passed a resolution calling for the FBI to remove Japanese Americans from the city. The new resolution apologized for, quote, failure to support and defend the civil rights and civil liberties of Japanese Americans and those of Japanese heritage. And your line, this was last month, that you said was, I do think it is our duty to use our platform to speak out against hate in any form. We've talked about the rise in hate crimes before. That also is increasing. Why was that vote important to you? And I want to ask that in the context of your service on the Reparations Task Force, where you're looking at righting similar historic wrongs. Why is this something that you're passionate about?
Oh my goodness, because I believe in America. You know, that's why I'm passionate about these issues, because I want a healthy city, a healthy state, a healthy country. And there is no way that we can be healthy without reckoning with our history. And so, you know, as I said, it is our duty to use our platform to educate and be educated. You know, oftentimes the public educates us. So I certainly want to make sure that that is clear. But it's our duty, you know, to bring these issues out, to go into our archives, to acknowledge that that was a completely racist, hurtful, horrible policy that got a unanimous vote, and to change that, to right that wrong. And I am, you know, a person that kind of gets mixed into not wanting to do symbolic things only, right? Because I think there's so much work to be done outside of, you know, having symbolic votes or doing symbolic things. But, you know, that's very important. And also that resolution included, what we passed included an apology, which goes such a long way. And the week before, I believe, the weekend before, I was actually at an in-person reparation task force meeting in Los Angeles, where members of the Japanese community who fought for reparations based on the treatment and torture of internment camps here in the United States were there presenting to us and helping walk the task force through what their process was, what their community went through, how there were so many differences of opinion as they were approaching, you know, receiving reparations for the harm that had been done to their community. And so it was, you know, it's so important that we continue to bring these things up, not as a way to promote any kind of hate at all, but as a way to educate ourselves about who we are, who we have been as a country, as Americans, so that we can know we'll never go back there, that we will never do, you know, those things again. And so it was a very important vote. I was very happy to see that, on the agenda, and very happy to hear from community members that were there to speak about that very issue.
Yeah. Well said. And I know this is off the subject of the campaign, but you're on the reparations task force, and there was a proposal to extend the work of that task force for another year to give you some more time to collect information, talk to folks, work on your report. That was nixed by the governor. So you have how many months left now to that final document?
We have until June of
Yeah.
next year.
Yeah.
So I think that's about 8 months.
Yeah.
To
Did you want an extension? Did you think that that was necessary? Can you get the work done in 8 months? What do you put that in context for us?
it is. I know how hard we just talked about CPP. It's taken us 4 years, right, to get to this point. So I certainly understand that. However, we do have an interim report already, which is in a very extensive 500-page report. We have a heavy lift in front of us to really refine a lot of the recommendations that are in the report and make sure that we're all rowing in the right direction, and then put that before the legislature, right, and see what happens from there. But we have to get it done. There's 8 months. We have to get the work done. Every single task force member is committed to that. And so we're going to get the work done. I had no idea that the bill was coming forward. I was going to be there for the next 8 months, or however long I had the privilege of being a part of this history, frankly. And so that was I really didn't have a position on it per se. There were a lot of members of the community. Look, we've waited for reparations for a long time. And we want to wrap it up, based on the original bill, AB 3121, that then Assembly Member Weber, now of course California Secretary of State, authored. So we, along with, sponsors and community members. So we're moving forward, and we're going to do the work.
Yeah. And now let's get to the vote on Monday, and both the 4 years of history and the time ahead of us on the Commission on Police Practices. Why did that take so long after the November 2020 vote? I mean, here we are, almost 2 whole years later, and we're still trying to figure out the framework of it.
Yeah. So we talked about this at Malcolm X Library a few months ago, and we talked about the fact that we really need to go back in history, back in the 80s, when the Community Review Board was passed, and the fact that there were 2 measures on that ballot. One had more teeth, one had less teeth. The one that had less teeth was the one the Police Officers Association supported. That was the one that made it through and was a part of the city structure through it was at that time the Citizens Review Board, right, on police practices. Then there were changes when I was a staffer, 2016 maybe, which changed the name of the board and did a few other things. And those changes took 2 years. Okay, all this time, groups like the Obergillian Bar Association, who unfortunately is not a part of this record, but I want to put them on the record now as being big advocates of the Commission on Police Practices in its new form. And in addition to Women Occupy, and then groups like Mid-City Can, who came along and have played a big role in where we are now. That those changes, took a couple of years, while those groups have been advocating for over a decade for more teeth in this board. So we have to remember that as I came into office, there were procedural glitches that took that ordinance that they were considering at that time to put on the ballot, took it off the table. So day one, when I got into office, I asked our city attorney to give us the process, because it was important for me to understand the process. So from that point on, we got it on the next possible election ballot. That was 2 years, right? We knew that once you put something on the ballot, you have to then provide a mechanism of implementation, especially since, and this is lost oftentimes, the council has full control of this commission. The council appoints and votes on all of the commissioners, and the council does all of the administrative work to keep this commission going. That's really the first of its kind.
As opposed to the mayor, that's the distinction that you're drawing.
That is absolutely correct. And we did that because, the mayor is the chief of police boss, right? Mm-hmm. And so having that is just a simple check and balance. Yeah. That is extremely important. It gets lost, but that's a part of it being independent and having that check, having that balance, and also, building that strong council that I talk about so much. So because we went that route, we cannot make independent decisions as council members. Any decision that we have to make has to be in a public meeting, and it has to include a vote. And so that is why, we have been going back and forth to make sure that this was right. And I want to bring in another element, which is the community governance model that my office has really built out to have community members be a part of that process from inception till the end of it, right? As much as possible. Now, we go into meet and confer. That's meet and confer. That's right. Something that is not done in open meetings because of labor negotiation laws, right? But
go ahead.
I
was going to say, speaking of meet and confer, that's one of the issues I wanted to ask you about, because this did surface publicly at that meeting where Jared Wilson, for those who don't know, the president of the San Diego Police Officers Association, said, quote, that officers hold zero trust in the CPP as it currently stands, and quote, our cops are better off somewhere else. How do you respond to those two statements?
I think, first of all, I think leadership is important. And I think that if we work for an institution, we have to believe in it and try our best to make it better. I don't think it's helpful for anybody in the city of San Diego, including members of District 4, to not have a police department, right? And when you get up there and say that no one wants to work here, I think that also contributes to the morale of the department. And I think that's very unfortunate that a leader, right, would say that. I know that this is not something that he agrees with at all. I think it's his right and very fair for him to represent his members, right, and to make those arguments publicly. I think that's very fair. I just hope that, we can work together. I have always said that. I said that. We talked about the Police Officers Association in my first UT editorial meeting back in 2018. They have a job to do, I said then, and so do I. And so I am still about bringing community and the department together. I am still about building out a system that all community members can trust. The statistics do not lie. We're dealing with disparities in treatment that is unequal. Mm-hmm. And that is an issue, right? So I can understand that he has an opinion. I would also just say that really true accountability and reform with regard to our police department, who do, especially now, have a very hard job. We still need to have those conversations because those disparities are still happening out there in our communities and on our streets.
Yeah.
And I am not going to stop the conversation because George Floyd happened two years ago. It is a conversation that I'm going to continue to have as long as I hold the seat. One more thing that I want to say, and make sure that everyone that was listening knows this, that we have put forth alternative models to be included in our public safety ecosystem understanding that officers have the responsibility, and we want them to have the responsibility of really dealing with violent crime. We all support that. I've always supported that. I also know that there are some proactive measures that we can take in order to reduce crime in our communities. We, have advocated for SD Nights, which is a park program. It's parks after dark, but we've been advocating for that since I got into office. The No Shots Fired program, where we do have folks that go out and mediate a lot of the situations in our communities. And I can tell you that our homicide rate in the Southeastern Division is down 50% this year from where it was last year. And I have to say that I think that the way that we are approaching this work with respect for one another, with keeping an open mind, with helping folks and understanding the different roles that everyone can play in keeping our community safe, is contributing to that.
Mm-hmm. So when should people expect the CPP to meet? I mean, I think it's a 25-member organization. You still have some votes as we talk about this framework. We don't need to get into the details and the back and forth on that, but when do you expect the framework to be finalized, 25 people to be appointed, and that first meeting to take place?
Soon.
Can you be more specific?
I cannot. There's still a lot of different factors, but we're working on it. It's still the top priority in my office, so it'll be soon. But we hit a milestone on Monday, and I'm very grateful for it, and thank my colleagues for their support as well.
Yeah, and walk us through the process of the 25 appointees. Are names already coming in? Are you thinking of names? Is there a place, if people are interested watching this call, that they can send you a resume? How do people get involved?
Yeah, we are going to be working on that with the council administration, and so as soon as we know, folks will know. At this time, we do have an interim commission, as you know, and they are very eager to get folks on post to help with a lot of the cases that we're dealing with. So we're moving as fast as we possibly can, and we will have that information. If you're interested, there is not quite a link yet, but you can absolutely get in touch with my office at Montgomery Steppe at sandiego.gov to let us know that you're interested. I
appreciate that. Another board that's coming before too long, but maybe not fast enough, is the Privacy Advisory Board. That one, the mayor is appointing those subject to council confirmation. There are 9 seats on that. Let's kind of take a step back. The Privacy Advisory Board was created because of some of the trust questions and surveillance issues with smart streetlights and other ShotSpotter, other issues. First reading of that Privacy Advisory Board ordinance was in April. I covered City Hall. Usually a second reading comes 2 weeks later. This one was in August. So again, I guess the question is, why is this taking so long? And specifically, I saw that supporters were hoping that some appointees might be named by late September. What's the process for those appointees? Are those coming along? Do you know?
Those are coming along, and so I am not sure because, frankly, the council president creates the agenda, and so we have not talked about this yet. So I don't want to get ahead of him or the mayor for that matter. But those certainly are coming along. That board is very much needed, and we need to get it up and running as soon as possible. We want to be able to evaluate these technologies so that they can be used accordingly and within parameters that I think will provide that balance that we're looking for between their privacy rights and absolutely in the interest of public safety. So we want to get it up and going as soon as possible. We want strong members to occupy those seats so that we can have good impact reports and that come before us as council members so that we can make the appropriate decisions. I will say, according to the timing, these are some very hard issues, and they do require a change of mentality, but also they require a lot of work because we're digging into areas that have not had much oversight in the past. It's when we're working these issues out we want them to be successful. And I've always said, I want everything that we do in my office, I want to live past me, right? And so sometimes that takes a little time in the era of instant gratification, and everything is so quick, and a million things are coming at you at once, right? We're trying to make sure that whatever we do and whatever is in the record coming from the Office of District 4 has sustainability. So I think that's very important to point out as well.
And I read that the Privacy Advisory Board is subject or getting outside legal review. Is that the case? So it's not the city attorney's office that's vetting that? Is that part of the reason for the delay, or is that even accurate?
I don't think that it is accurate.
Okay.
Not quite
This is
sure.
This is why we ask the questions before publishing the information. Yeah.
Not quite sure. I can check on that, but I think we're moving forward, and I think that everything is still in-house at this point.
Okay.
I know that the city attorney's office helped and guided us through the process of taking the ordinance that came from Trustee who worked so hard on this, the commission, and kind of doing the back and forth and getting it through the city system. So.
Yeah, and I think I missed a synaptic connection there. I think what's going through the outside legal review is not the privacy component, but the protect.
That is accurate.
Yes.
Okay.
So what is the next steps for the Protect Act? Is that coming to council at some point? What should San Diegans expect?
Yes, I've always said we're going to have the conversation around Protect for sure. What I've been focusing on is what we did on Monday, and also as a backup, some of the questions that you just asked me about making sure that we're getting CPP up and running. Had to certainly do that, but in the meantime, we have been, Protect is there, and it's on the table. We need to deal with profiling that goes on in our department, and so we have to have these tough conversations, and I'm still willing to do that. And so I'm looking forward to having that conversation. It will be a tough one, I understand, because as you said earlier, timing is everything, and we are dealing with we are dealing with violent crime. We're in that paradigm shift. We're dealing with quite a bit of folks who don't have houses to go to. We're dealing with so many issues right now, and also this dissatisfaction of CPP, right? So we've got a lot on the table, but this is what changes. It's not comfortable.
Yeah, well said again. Yeah, and for those who don't know and are following on, the Protect Act basically would change pretext stops. It does more than that, but that's essentially what it does. There's a couple other issues I want to get at, and I'm mindful of the time, but I do want to ask one more question about STPD, because tomorrow your committee, Public Safety and Livable Neighborhoods, is getting a look at the body camera audit, the latest body camera audit. Can you share what will you see? What does that data show you? What should San Diegans know about how the police department is using or not using its body cameras?
Yeah, looking forward to reviewing that audit tomorrow at committee. I believe one of the things that it shows is that we don't have quite enough footage that we would like to have because of the lack of turning the cameras on.
Yeah.
Right. And I remember when we first deployed the cameras, and that it ended up really at that time being a safeguard for community and police officers.
Yeah.
And so, this is not something that was ever meant to hurt anyone, but in the spirit of transparency, it's very important that we have the footage that we need that is coming from these body-worn cameras. So it'll be a very interesting conversation tomorrow. I'm looking forward to having it, and then I'm looking forward to the improvement, and then getting through the recommendations that the auditor.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm looking forward to seeing what that says too. And you had brought up the city attorney earlier. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about the councils and your relationship with Mara Elliott. There's a couple pieces of context for this question for you. first of all, there's a lot of lawyers on the city council. You're one of them. Mara Elliott did say that the 101 Ash Street settlement was a bad idea and that the council should not proceed. You were in a minority of 3 council members who agreed with her there. But then in a separate, it wasn't a vote, I guess, it was her sharing with you the details of the Housing Commission hotel settlement. You expressed surprise and irritation. I'm going off memory, so I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you were dissatisfied with her approach. So I guess my question to you is, do you feel like the relationship between Mara and the council is good given those situations? Could be stronger? Is the fault of the city attorney in her office or the city council's office? Talk to me a bit about that. I think, and again, the backdrop being, San Diegans want their government to work effectively. Maybe it's not.
Yeah, and I want to provide some context because I didn't express necessarily irritation.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
With the city attorney's office in that instance, we are constrained as a council quite a bit in the information that is shared to us, and this is not the fault of the city attorney's office necessarily. It is wrapped up in the laws that govern us as a legislative body, as a municipal legislative body, which I have communicated with the Attorney General's office about some of the restrictions that we have, and how we can lift those and still act in full transparency, which is what I'm all about. And so that, my frustration comes from some of that, and that has, the city attorney has to advise us and tell us what the law is. It is not her fault of what the law is. She has to advise us on that. And I know that, for me, we do need to have healthy relationships because we do have to work together. It is also just, I don't see anything with having differences of opinion and having healthy debate. That for me, that is not really an issue when folks don't agree on every single thing, right? I think it's just, a matter of respect and getting to know what folks, including me, see as disrespectful. A little tug of war is not a big issue for me. Like I said, in times where things are going to be uncomfortable because we're doing things the way they've never been done before. I accept that, and I don't take things personally. I am also just learning that we have to have respect for one another. So I'm hopeful. We're elected officials. We all have our constituencies, and we have to work through these issues because we don't really have time for anything else, right? And so, we're good, and I just, look forward to continuing to complete the things that I need for my community. No one in my community, they don't have time for me to have spats with anybody that's going to help us accomplish our goals. And so I'm looking forward to continuing all the relationships that I have at City Hall.
And speaking of civility, especially among elected officials and their constituents, let me segue into homelessness and the recent flare-up between Bill Walton, very prominent San Diegan, and Mayor Todd Gloria about homelessness. I guess first getting to the issues, what do you think about the mayor's new approach, which is the old mayor's approach, to kind of crack down on tents and to ask people who have camped on sidewalks during the day to relocate? Do you think that's the right approach, the wrong approach, the right time, the wrong time for that? And then what do you think, as someone who's watching this dispute between 2 prominent San Diegans unfold so publicly and so viscerally?
To answer your first question, this issue is important to all of us. It was important to me as the Public Safety and Livable Neighborhoods Committee Chair because we never really discussed homelessness in that arena, and I wanted to bring it to committee as part of our jurisdiction because oftentimes as a council we're kind of put in these positions where we hadn't seen the information before, And we need to make those decisions on the dais, where we haven't had an opportunity to dig into what the proposed solutions are. So what I did during that committee meeting was bring in the Hill Network. Thank you all, if you're listening, for coming to committee and presenting, because I had gone to one of their legislative briefings. And this is, of course, as you are aware, a group of folks that have lived experiences that bring forward solutions to the table. I think that is extremely important when we're talking about these things, because often a lot of us who are providing solutions to these issues are very bureaucratic. And if you walk through what someone who has had lived experience had to go through, trying to make it through our bureaucracy, oftentimes we don't help, we hurt, even though our intention is to help. I think having folks with lived experience at the table in a real way and not a performative way is extremely important, which is why we hosted the Hill Network and other folks during our committee meeting in July. Of course, the council president wanted to, he hosted an entire day. We were there for 8 hours. We talked about this disproportionality with people who are Black and homeless, which is very stark and very sad, and a reflection of who we are as a city. Unfortunately, this entire issue is. And so while we are looking at different mechanisms of enforcement, I'll just give you a quick example of encampments in District 4. There was one area in particular where we did have folks go and talk to the people that were living on the corner over and over again. And we did that for probably about a year. And after that, we decided to go the enforcement route. It was near a school. There was other activity going on there. We were hearing from a lot of homeowners, but we went through the steps first of not having law enforcement involved and then bringing law enforcement in later. And some people wanted help at that time, others did not. I understand why some people don't want help. They don't want to go to a congregate setting. There are all types of issues. I think what we need to do if we're going to enforce in this way is make sure that we have options for people who are willing and want to get off the street. And that is something that we need to continue to do, and we need to do it in a big way. We have a lot of people on our streets. We have 89,000 renters that are at risk of homelessness right now. Mm. And so that is where, we need to continue to concentrate. That's what I want to do. It's a tough position for all of us to be in as elected officials, because we have the responsibility of keeping everyone safe. And it is not safe, as we've seen, necessarily to sleep on the street where a car can run folks over and kill people. It's not safe. At the same time, we live in we have the most expensive housing costs, in the nation. And I have talked to people who find themselves on the streets, who have worked for San Diego Unified School District, who have been truckers, who, one man that I was talking to got into a horrible accident and woke up in the hospital and had lost everything at that point. So, having a commenter during our meeting on a Monday had a comment. He said, we don't need more housing, we need more compassion. And I think that, yes, we need more housing, but I got his point, and I agree that, how many of us have actually had conversations with folks, and how much can a conversation really change someone's mind, which I think it can. So, we're trying, we're all doing our best. We're doing the best we know how. Many people are calling our offices. And so we're trying to balance all of those interests.
So do you favor using police to break up encampments and to relocate homeless individuals during the day?
What I've heard, the most recent the most recent directive is to allow the encampments to be where they are, but not dwelling in them for certain hours of the day.
Mhm.
I think just like we were talking about climate change, in my mind, it's a case by case. Everyone is not the same. And so that's what makes enforcement really hard. And legally, we are required to have a place for folks to go
Correct.
before we try to shut them down and take all of their belongings. So, it's again, it's extremely tough, and it's not a one size fits all. And we have to get out of thinking that way.
And then do you want to weigh in on the Bill Walton v. Todd Gloria argument?
Not really. We all have to be about solutions. That's
Yeah.
it. And
Fair.
those of us who have the means to help solve these issues should be doing that. And we all need to be working together. And that's it.
How do you want to share? What are your future? I mean, I know we're kind of having this conversation, the focus of this election. Your opponent isn't here. You did very well in the primary. You're widely expected to win. I'm sure you're not going to say, I'm already looking forward to my next election. But some people have thrown your name out there for mayor, which I think is a sign of respect for you and the work that you, along with your community, have accomplished. What are your political goals? Where do you see yourself after the city council? Because this, if elected, would be your second and final term.
Well, first of all, when I got elected, I made it a point that I really would just spend all of my energy making the district better, especially initially in setting a foundation. So what that meant was I had to keep the focus on those who put me here, which are the residents of District 4. Otherwise, I'd be thinking naturally, right? Ambition, where do I want to go next? Should I say this? Should I do this? Should I jump on this issue? How is it going to impact my future? I had to take that out of the equation, especially for the first 4 years, because honestly, the members of my community deserve that. And we have been so far behind and have been underserved and denied so much that I did not want to um, promote that in office while I was in office because of my own personal ambition. I just personally felt that wasn't why I was there and not why people put me there.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many, politics is volatile right now. We never know what seats are opening. We don't know. And so, I will think about that once we get through November. But right now, I have no idea where I want to land. If I want to stay in politics, I do come from two entrepreneur parents. So that is in my heart too. But I have no idea. I know that, my hope is that I will be able to serve this city, this region, in whatever way they'll have me.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate that. I won't ask a follow-up question, but I appreciate that. Let me ask you about some of the two votes where I think were interesting to me, because in one, it showed you successfully pushing for kind of a righteous outcome, and in the other, being in a lone minority in a vote that went 7-1 against you. The vote where I think I'm appreciative of what you did was when the council approved the mayor's choice for the sports arena site redevelopment. You were the council member who asked that the IBA be allowed to sit in, the independent budget analysts be allowed to sit in on negotiations between the city and the developer, city staff and developer, and that the developer and staff give quarterly reports to council, and that the developer give quarterly updates to the community. Now, I'm always a let the public in, shine the light on these things kind of person. That isn't always the case at City Hall. Why did you feel like that was important? Before I get to the case where you weren't so successful, why do you think that was so important to advocate for?
Well, because of the way our city government is structured, council cannot participate in or be a part of negotiations, right? There are reasons for that. That's fine. What that does is unintentionally, a lot of times, it may leave some details out once reports are given to us when we get to the council position, right? And we have to vote on something. I just thought that, although the independent budget analyst cannot participate, be there to witness and view will give us the perspective that we need moving forward with the votes that we will be asked to take. I just think that that's extremely important. And although it got lost in a lot of the minutia of the day, I think it was an important vote to take, an important thing to ask for, and not to restrict that that attendance for particular meetings or whatever it may be, but that we really would have just an ear in the room to help us understand how conclusions, how the parties came to the conclusions that they did, in a way that benefits the council. As we know, the IBA was established to help the council have an idea of what is going on with regard to budget decisions. We do not have access to some of the systems that city staff has access to, but the independent budget analyst does. And so I think that it's important moving forward that if we make the best, most informed decision possible, that they need to be in the room.
Yeah, I appreciate that eye into what are, complex conversations that are taking place behind the public view. It's interesting you frame that in terms of the powers of the mayor and council, because the other issue I want to ask you about, where you want to lose an end, you probably know where this is going, is when San Diego faces the $4 billion infrastructure backlog, and the proposal to speed projects up by, I think, 4 or 6 months each, was to take the council out of that equation and to give more powers to the mayor in terms of hiring consultants, giving consultants more money before they had to come back to council. You pushed back on that, but you were the only council member who pushed back on that. This relinquishing of council power. Explain your vote. Explain your thinking there, because that is a case where I can kind of see both sides of it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start by saying that one of our most important jobs as elected officials on a local level is to deliver on infrastructure. And we have an extreme backlog. We have a system that can be very bureaucratic and very slow. So I totally understand that. What I disagree with is that routing something in a system so that it can come to council is really the only problem that we have, right? And it's the only way to streamline these things. I just don't think that is true. And I also think that those EOC goals that we talk about that deal with, the diversity that we have on the projects, who we're giving the contracts to, I don't want to compromise that in any way. And so while we're having these equity conversations, I want to make sure that council can be involved in those, right? And the only way that we can be involved is when things come to us in a public meeting. That's it. I am very leery about, giving that up. And I think that for right reason, it passed, right? We all want to see these projects deployed in our communities quicker. And I agree with that. I just wasn't there as far as giving up some of the, authority that we have as a council, not because we just want authority, but because this is how a system is its most helpful and effective when there is a check and balance. And so at this time, I was not able to support it. I understand why it passed, and I know that we're working with the mayor's office and we're working with engineering and capital projects, to deal with some of the issues that I have. That is always going to be an open door, and I appreciate that. But I just couldn't go there, because I don't think that it's just about council. I think that we have some inefficiencies in our system in general that we need to look at it comprehensively.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, so much of politics also is seeing conflicting positions and having to, make difficult decisions. So I appreciate you walking me through your thought process there and walking the voters through that as well. One last question. You've been very gracious with your time. We're over in an hour, so I appreciate you not just bouncing off the call at 60 minutes. But I want to end with a question on housing, which we really haven't spent about, I feel bad, shoehorning one final question into a conversation on housing. But again, in terms, like my question on climate change, I think the question is, the city is doing many things to try to make it better over the long haul. But in terms of what can be done now, you've, I think, rightly focused on the city's responsibility to use city-owned land to develop more housing, right? City-owned land. So I guess my question for you is, how much land is in District 4 that could be used for housing? And how much of a responsibility is that for District 4 to bear versus other districts? Like, what should the breakdown be citywide?
Yeah, really good question. I think that what I have said is that we do need to focus on having low income housing in higher opportunity areas as well. I think that we have to build out our communities and be smart about providing those who live in our communities with everything that they need to survive and to thrive in our city. And I think that, if we can go back to even some HUD regulations, where if there is a concentration of poverty and that's intentional, then that's not, what we should be trying to do as we build housing and build out our communities. So I think that we all have to share in this responsibility that we have. I think it's important to note that this was gone over in the county joint meeting, that you almost have to make $50 an hour just to, live here as a family in that 80% income bracket. That is 80% AMI, the average median income bracket. That's crazy. So we do have a responsibility, right, to the members of the community to provide housing. We all have to take on the responsibility together. We all have to also think about infrastructure, to think about, our firefighters, fire stations. We have to think about our police officers. This is something that we have to think about in a comprehensive and holistic way. But I definitely support everyone having affordable housing all across the city in all 9 districts.
Mm-hmm. Council member, thank you very much for your time. Like I said, we could have talked for several hours. So I appreciate you taking time for one. For all those watching, please go to SanDiegoUnionTribune.com/election 2022 for all of our interviews with the candidates, including this one, which will be on there before too long. Council member, thank you for your time and your work and your energies. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.